Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Thank you very much. And of course, let's just get into it and we'll look at what is happening currently. First of all, the pronouncements by Dr. Matiang'i regarding, of course, the North Rift region, that yes, it is now, you know, they're on the lookout right now and they're on the ready. What do you think about that particular statement and what is happening, of course, in Lamu? Let's begin with you, Dr. Werunga Simiyu.
I don't know. Because one thing I see in Dr. Matiang'i is some form of hurriedness. It's like things were not working. So all of a sudden he feels the country is not moving in the right direction. It's like our security forces were not working. So therefore he really is giving us an impression of some slowness on the part of our security organs before he took over. So for some reasons, I don't understand why he's giving the country an impression that he has to move fast so that things move fast. Mm-hmm. What we know is our police service has been working. We know our National Security Council has been operating. We know the National Security Advisory Committee has been operating. And therefore, most of the things that we are being shown to see like nothing was moving were already being worked on. And like I said the other time, when you come up with these things, like the issues of hotspots, I'm happy nobody's talking about them because we trust them. You give an impression of like things are not working in this country. And yet, Debarl, we have our security organs that have been working 24/7 to ensure that everything he's talking about is functional. Mm-hmm. And another thing you need to understand that even all these things he's talking about, he's already found them in process. Therefore, this urgency and this publicity about security around the elections, personally, I don't think it's good for the country. He should have done it quietly because we know our security forces have been on top of things. And unless something untoward that we don't know as Kenyans makes him to be so visible and voluble, then personally I don't understand. And it impacts greatly on those who are professional in our security systems, who know things have been working, things have been moving, and then all of a sudden the country is being shown like we seem to have lost it somewhere. So some new sheriff in town mm-hmm. has taken over and things must move. Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right, let's pick from, because in the late 2015, we understand that a UN task force, of course, reported and warned that Jaish-e-Mohammed militia, which includes several Western foreign fighters and hundreds of Kenyans militants, is now able to hold territory in areas north of Lamu County, right? And of course we can see, yes, they've actually deployed, or they've come from Somalia, and right now they're in the country. Our warning was there. Two years down the line, we are still taken aback, or maybe this is like it's really coming from the left side. Was it the government that was actually slow on the uptake, given that warning by the UN reports? Captain Collins Wanderi.
The metamorphosis of the militant organizations, particularly at the coastal region of Kenya, is not a new thing.
Yes.
And the UN was right that initially, just before, when Al-Shabaab started fighting in Somalia, they released a lot of propaganda and extremist ideology material, urging the recruitment and the enlistment of the so-called fighters to defend the religion of Islam against the onslaught by what they call kafirs, and mainly meaning Christians at the coastal region. Mm-hmm. And you remember we had a lot of people and a lot of extremist preachers in Mombasa who were captured live on tape, like the late Makaburi, we had Abdi Rogo, and a lot of young people heeded to their call and crossed over to Somalia, of course through Boni Forest and parts of Kiunga in Lamu. And Subsequently, after that, after the Mpeketoni attacks in June 2014, Al-Shabaab made direct threats and said, we will take the war to your country and cause havoc in your cities and break down your skyscrapers. That is something Al-Shabaab said. And therefore, coupled with the issues of conflict over land and resources in Lamu region, that found a fertile ground to then deploy a friendly militia back into Kenya. And Jaish Ayman is actually an insurgent group which is operating inside the territory of Kenya. That is why sometimes here we have said, personally I have said, that it is not Al-Shabaab per se directly engaged in the attacks on the government installations and civilians inside Lamu. It is one of their affiliates, and that is Jaish Ayman. You know, subsequently after that report, the government deployed, or rather created Operation Leader Boni, because that is where the militants were operating from. And Operation Leader Boni has been under the leadership of a civilian administrator, Mr. James Oleserian, until last week.
Yes.
And you are right to the extent that, that this operation seems to have a problem, because that is in a sense why then the government reacted by redeploying Mr. James Oleserian back to the office of the president, meaning that his leadership has been put in question, because for almost 2 years, the same group has been operating. But let me say this, because sometimes there is also what we call apparent feeling that perhaps we are not using the right tactics in fighting this group. I can say without fear of contradiction that there is credible intelligence and incontrovertible evidence that Jaish Ayman is receiving aid and comfort, logistical support from some of the local people in Lamu County. That evidence and intelligence is there. And this is one thing that needs to be done. You cannot fight these militant groups which is using unconventional methods of war by using the normal conventional the tactics of conventional war. You have to go a bit further, and perhaps that is why this mission of Operation Leader Boni has not been very successful, because 2 years is a very long time to allow a militant, an insurgent group to have a theater of operation freely inside your territory. Yes.
All right, and of course, that's what we are really problem, because on July, a top security chief also held a meeting at Manda Naval Base for a post-mortem of the unraveling situation of what is happening in Lamu right now, and on the operation that began. This is the Operation Linda Boni, led by Kenya Defense Forces Chief Samson Madade. And they questioned heads of the operation in Boni Forest as to why the terrorists were still having, tentacles within Boni. 2 years down the line, there seems not to be any effectiveness that has been realized so far. So when we have the top military of course, heads questioning also this particular operation, are we left to worry? Dr. Mustafa.
Debarl, thank you very much. First of all, you asked two questions on Baringo and Boni. With regard to Baringo, I was there over the weekend and passed through Marigat and the surrounding towns, and it's very clear that there is calm, or calm has returned in that part of the country. People are now going about their businesses as they should, and it seems that the operation there is working, and it is working very well. The challenge is, of course, these are short-term solutions to a much more difficult problem that will need to be resolved with in a more strategic manner. with plans that extend beyond just the operations, the security operations in Baringo. With regard to Boni and the fact that unfortunately it appears that these groups have a set camp or shop, wherever you want to call it, this was bound to happen, Debarl. We have been assuming and we have not paid particular attention to these groups. Not just 2 years ago, but way back 14, 15 years ago, when the rogue clerics were busy with their meta-narratives and narratives trying to recruit Kenyans to localize the grievances that are much more global, this whole thing on war on Islam, and infuse this kind of grievance with local grievances of land in the coast. And this is why so many, well, the fact that we did not address these issues about a decade ago meant that many young people fell trap to these narratives and the recruitment, and some of those are now in Boni Forest. Jaish al-Ayman, which has conducted a number of operations inside the country and killed many Kenyans, seems to have expertly now taken advantage of the local grievances, particularly in the coast of Kenya. And that the fact that we now hearing that there is a lot of local support in terms of logistics of some of these fighters in Boni Forest means that there is a lot of sympathy for some of these groups. And these sympathies need to be broken. The country will have to address, as part of the strategy to address the pansurgency that is ongoing in parts of Lamu, we'll have to address the land issue, number one. We'll have to address a number of issues related to marginalization and perception of exclusion, while at the same time working very hard to root these fighters or terrorists that are in Boni Forest. It's not going to be a walkover in Boni Forest. We've seen what has happened in Sambisa with Boko Haram, in the jungles of Central African Republic, northern parts of Congo with Lord's Resistance Army. These dense forests are very much difficult for militaries to operate in. And again, Debarl, a decade earlier, we should have come up with a much better strategy to prevent these kind of groups from setting camp in areas like Boni. It is going to take a number of years to try and address the issues. And political leaders in Lamu and other parts of Coast Province, including Northeastern Province, will have to work very closely with security agencies to make sure that this problem is addressed. Now, failure to address this problem means that these areas are going to be volatile, they will be less development, and the local communities are going to suffer more as a result of military operations in those areas.
All right, we want now to actually look and peel back the mask because we see that people are saying it is because now of the military occupation in Somalia, but it seems the situation down on the ground is diametrically different from the perception that we're getting also from the security agents, or maybe also from security analysts as well, that yes, it is because we have our troops and the boots on the ground in Somalia. The genesis of this particular attacks that we're seeing in Somalia is solely land. Is that true? Let's hear from Dr. Machira.
In this discussion, we have two types of crimes here. We have the crimes committed in Coast and Mandela based on terrorism. Then we have crimes committed in North Rift based on banditry and cattle theft. For the two cases, I am a bit worried because I came from Laikipia yesterday, and the reason why we have a lot of these crimes ongoing all the time is because of the haphazard nature of policing in those areas. Whenever a crime takes place in Baringo and Laikipia and Saburu, what happens, the police lash there. They lash there with a horde of vehicles. They stay there for 2 days or for 1 week, and then they disappear. So our confidence for that, some of us who live there is very low, because they come, they shoot us for a day or two, then they disappear. And then when they come, they start a disarmament process that takes a week or two. Immediately it starts, there are some other people who start crying foul. One of our MPs in Laikipia North was arrested a few days ago. The case is now dragging. It will continue dragging. It's as though those people who die are not considered like, you know, like they are very important, including our large-scale farmers. Rushing to Boni Forest, we have heard songs from the government, including the police, that they have arrested 700 youth who they are now demobilizing and reintegrating back the society. We have never known who those youth were. We have never seen the rehabilitation centers. We have not known anything. So the way we treat terrorism in Boni and Mandela and Garissa area, it is so disorganized, it's so uncoordinated, and this has made this crime continue for all this time. So I think there is a crisis in Kenya. We have better things to do than things concerning security. We are, like now, we are more concerned with going around shouting everywhere when people are dying in Lamu. And there is curfew, and that curfew is now being taken to mean that it is supposed to be because of elections. Curfew has been on in there. And if these people are threatening us that they are going to attack us during elections, sure, I think the security agencies should do something to make sure that the electoral period should not be spoiled by these insurgents. So for me, I blame the police. And although Matiang'i has come, General Kaisari was also doing well. Matiang'i also came in the Ministry of Education. And we have seen changes from the former Kaimenyi, who was a DVC somewhere. So I would like Matiang'i to continue with that speed. We see whether you are going to change.
Thank you. Let's hear from Professor Noah Midamba. Your reaction.
Debarl, both Boni and Baringo are complex issues that require careful, strategic consideration and not short-term issues where we say we win. That's how George Bush declared the war is over. Like the case of Vietnam, it took years with the ultra-modern weapon that United States have, pouring weapons after weapon, and they never won Vietnam. At the end, they pull out. Here's what I'm saying, and my colleagues here have pointed quite a number of things. The issue of Baringo is much more complex than security. We're talking about water issue. We're talking about lifestyle of the people who've been there for years. We're talking about lack of education. We're talking about historical ethnic strife. Now, you've got to get to the root of why these things happen before you solve it. You can carry a big gun and stop people from fighting, but that does not stop the root issues that has cased this over and over. Next year, we may have another lack of rain, and you will see another strife happening. That has nothing to do with what we're doing now. That does not say we are not applying every effort to stop it. But let's be very, very careful as we go into it and not be complacent of the short-term gain. And then you go into the Boni Forest. And here again is another very complex issue. For some time now, I've said KDF is one of the most proudest, highly disciplined fighting force in this continent. The way we captured Kismayu was out of question. Americans refused to help, Europeans refused to help. We went there with air, sea, and land and captured Kismayu. What are we still doing in Kismayu? It is time for us to strategically retreat to our border so that we make sure that nobody crosses this porous border that we have. And unless we readdress that and get logged in and in the peace nation building of Somalia, we will never win.
Thank you.
Because they are people, they are complex issues like what our friends here have said, of citizens, Kenyans, who are working together with these people. Israel use, detect, deter, and destroy. You cannot detect when the vital ingredient of the security is supporting the enemy that we have.
All right, thank you. Let's come back to you, Werunga, because you say, first of all, that the threat is growing largely because, as a country, security forces have relaxed and gave them, these are the militants that are in Boni, an opportunity to regroup. And you think also Boni Forest is posing a logistical challenge to Kenyan forces because it is difficult for the infantry, of course, to infiltrate, to advance also with vehicles, while an air attack will be ineffective because of a thick forest canopy. This really flies in the face of what we had also from Commissioner Marwa, where he said, yeah, let's bomb. And of course, they've been deploying the bombs, throwing bombs, of course, inside Boni. So does it defeat the purpose in the first place because of a thick canopy?
I think let me take you back to history. I left the military in 1998.
1998.
And even that time we had a military camp in Boni Forest at a place called Baragoni. At that time we had a GSU camp in Boni Forest. At that time we had smaller APs, they were not very strong at that time. At the same time we had militaries in Baringo, we had militaries in Baragoi, dealing with the issue of Kapedo and all those places. So I think what do we need to be asking ourselves, where did we stop thinking as a nation? Because this issue of Boni Forest is not yesterday, it's not about Al-Shabaab. It's been there for years. And I'm talking of a camp where I operated from, so I know that we've been in that place for a long time. What do we need to ask ourselves, and that's why I made that statement. For some time, there was a lull. And these people stopped making serious forays into Boni Forest. You see, initially, they would launch themselves into Boni Forest and walk back, or whatever means they used, and cross back into Somalia, even after the KDF took over Kismayo. The problem, and what I think we lost the plot, is when for some time we relaxed and started looking at the issue of Boni Forest not as a terror-related complex issue, but we started complicating the issue by including other things that we thought were part and parcel of the problems of Lamu. In the process, these fellows were recruiting young Kenyans from Lamu, from Mombasa, from Kwale. These are now the people, the Jaesh you are calling them, basically who are now part of Al-Shabaab, but mainly locals, who are taking advantage of the local grievances and having the local knowledge of Boni Forest to perpetuate what we are seeing. So I'll agree with most of my colleagues here. Boni Forest is not something we're going to talk about land. It's not something we're going to talk about flashing them tomorrow. It's not something we're going to talk about bombing the forest. Because you must bomb where you know the target is. The military does not do carpet bombing. The military bombs targets. You see? So there's no way we can listen to Marwa saying we are going to bomb the forest. So bomb what? The military is accountable. So they must bomb targets. And that's what I'm saying. For as long as we do not declare that place a military operational space, and we continue having the police in charge, appointing civilians to be in charge of this operation, and asking the military to come and work with you, is going to be very difficult. Why do I say that? Because the rules of engagement for the military and the police are completely different. When you deploy the military, they use their rules of engagement and they have a mission. Wanderi knows here. We go there with a purpose, we have limitations, you have a time frame, and you need to achieve. You don't go there to live the way our police officers go there to live and operate indefinitely. Debarl, for as long as we don't change the way we are operating in Boni, this country will be there for a very long time. And we must understand that it's not about Al-Shabaab alone. Boni has been a problem for a very long time. And that's why I made those statements, or whatever you are reading, that at some point we thought this thing can be done by the police. And therefore, as a country, we relaxed. I can tell you a story of West Pokot. 1984, I was a young officer. 1998, I was a pilot. We went back. 1988, 89, we went back to West Pokot. We stayed in West Pokot, and it was a military operation. That is the first time we went into Uganda, did our business in Amdat. And for close to 15 years, we didn't have any problems from the Karamojong and the Pokots themselves. So for as long as we are playing around with how we want to engage ourselves in Baragoni, without renaming that operation as a military operation, I think we shall play around with Boni, Kapedo, Laikipia for a long time. I know Laikipia is different because some of us come from there and we know what the problems are. But Kapedo problem and the Boni problem must be tackled in a manner that is commensurate with the threats and problems that this country is dealing with.
Right, thank you. Of course, we shall be drilling deeper on this. So is the issue land? Is the issue terrorist insurgents? What is the issue really in Lamu? Gentlemen, let's continue with the discussion right now. Before we took a short break, I think we were on Mr. Werunga. I think you had finalized your point.
Yes.
Can we pick up with Captain Collins Wanderi then,
yes,
as you, of course, organize or put your ducks in a row, I should say, right?
Yeah, Debarl, let us be honest on this matter of Operation Leader Boni. I think for 2 years, dealing with a ragtag militia group, which we have allowed, and I want to use the word we have allowed, to organize and set up camp within our territory, is a serious issue. It is the responsibility of the Kenya Defense Forces to protect or to safeguard the territorial integrity of the Republic of Kenya. It is no longer a function of the Rural Border Patrol Unit of the Administration Police, the General Service Unit, or the regular police. As my colleague Captain Werunga has said, there used to be a military camp in Baragoni. Now, there were also military camps, and sometimes it's good to look at history. There were also military detachments in areas like Garissa, Liboi, Hulugo, Amuma, and all those places. But in 2003, after the coming into power of the then NAC government, there were feelings by some of the members of the cabinet that we should remove those military camps and detachments because they were costly, and then they were costly to the economy. And I remember two of the ministers, they are prominent politicians today, and I was then in uniform, using very coarse language and crude language, essentially saying that members of the armed forces were idling in those areas. Now, the result has been that the moment that these camps were removed or were scaled down, the people who don't mean well for our country now got a very free zone to operate and move around. And the fact that the people we are dealing with in Boni have pledged to wage war. They have not pledged to fight for political grievances. They are waging a war against the population and the institutions of government. It should have been clear that this operation should be militarily led. It should not have been left to civilian hands. There is a reason for this. Rules of engagement are different. The type of equipment and the type of response is different with the police. The police are more focused on law enforcement. They want to arrest these people. They want to take them to court and have them charged. And we all know, sometimes when you have arrested militants who are fighting you, what kind of evidence are you going to adduce as to what they were doing in an area you don't control, in an area where you don't control? So therefore, it is incumbent to scale this operation up. It is no longer the commonplace of issue of dealing with law enforcement. It's not normal banditry. Now this is like an armed group. It's in fact what you'd call a rebel group operating within an area which, although they may not claim territorial space, they are able now to move within that area unrestricted. And that is very risky for our country, especially as we head to elections. Now let me just mention something, because you asked the question whether it is LAD or it's just extremism. LAD in Lamu West, and I like to repeat this because Lamu has two areas, Lamu East and Lamu West. In Lamu East, it is only last week that we had the first attack, recent attack, where in Mararani, in Kiunga, 2 civilians were killed by the militants. Most of the attacks have been concentrated in Lamu West. And what is the problem in Lamu West? In Lamu West, we have said before that that is the area you have 7 major projects: the international airport, the Lamu port, the Kenwind energy project, the SGR from Lamu to Isiolo, the oil pipeline to Isiolo all the way to South Sudan, a coal plant in Lamu, and as well as the LAPSET, the highway between Lamu and Isiolo. Right.
Let's leave it at that.
Yes.
We'll continue with that, of course. But let's say from Dr. Mustafa Yusuf Ali, because right now, when we have the Jai-Ash, you know, colluding with Boko Haram, so to speak, with this sort of ideology that they're trying to, you know, perpetrate also around Lamu as well. What sort of dynamics then should the military take? Because it seems we always say, why use the hard power, not the soft power?
Debarl, first, yeah, thank you very much.
We couple them together, yes.
Yeah, of course, that is the policy that the country has adopted to the national strategy to counter violent extremism at the national level across the country. But in Boni, you know, there is no point of going there and say we are going to have a soft approach. First of all, I want to agree with my 2 colleagues, Captains Werunga and Wanderi, that operation needs to be squarely, put squarely under the command of the military, the Kenya Defence Forces. It appears that the police will not be able to deal with that problem inside Boni, and it needs to be well, that needs to be militarized. And we need to learn lessons from Nigeria. In 2004, 5, 6, when Yusuf, a gentleman called Yusuf, the founder of Boko Haram, he was hobnobbing with the governors in the north. He was spending, he was even funding a part of the elections in some of those states in Nigeria, and people just looked at him and said, no, he won't develop to become who he then became. Well, he was killed in 2009 under mysterious circumstances in a police cell, but then the damage was already done. Boko Haram took over states in northern Nigeria. Now, the military came in so late, and the government of Jonathan Goodluck politicized the problem of Boko Haram in the hope of getting votes. And this is what we need to do right now here in Kenya. Politicizing the Boni forest security situation is going to cost this country. The military should just take over, and the political leaders should now just shut up. Let the military do its work in Boni forest. The issue of prevention, countering violent extremism is something that needs to continue around the country, so that the backlash from Boni forest or whatever operational issues are going to arise out of the Boni forest is not going to cause problems in the country. The Jaish Arman is led by one a Kenyan who was born in Meru. He was brought up, raised up here in Majengo, and they're more. It's not just Kenyans who are in Jaish Lyman. There are other foreigners, and that's why I referred that to as a pansurgency before, but led by Kenyans. And if this pansurgency is going to be allowed to fester and is not going to be nipped in the bud, it is going to extend beyond Boni, Lamu. It is going to be many young people, if they see that the terrorist group is succeeding, they might be tempted to want to join them. And the problems become much more complicated when it is allowed to the local grievances, rather, in terms of land, marginalization and exclusion, is let to mix with the problem of this pansurgency. And that is going to be a problem. It means that the local people will feel that there is a group here that is trying to address their grievances where the government has failed. That is where the government needs to be very careful to try and address those issues. And that's where the softer approaches come in. I'm very happy that the President Uhuru Kenyatta, first of all, cancelled the ranches, the title deeds that were the six that.
And we'll find out. We'll try and see why he really cancelled the ranches. What is the genesis? What is the problem? Were there also the problems with the title deeds, right? And you mentioned, of course, there's a mix that we're having here, which is not bringing everything with clarity to the fore, because it seems, yes, we're fighting extremism, there's the issue of land. What is it a fig leaf that is being put forward so that we cannot see the real, the reality on the ground? What is truly the problem? It is not extremism, is it land? And if it is land, who are the people who are festering and fomenting this rage and, of course, the attacks that we're having in Lamu? Dr. Apollos, maybe you can help us with this, with the criminal elements that are involved here. How can we see a clear picture and draw a demarcation line between extremism and, of course, real issues on the ground like land that are being fomented by maybe some politicians, even as we're heading towards general election? Very briefly.
Come to think of it, these extremists and terrorists, why are they all over the world, including Boni, why are they ever hooded? You will never see their faces. And if you are a true terrorist who breathes in some ideology, why hide yourself? I have a feeling that some of these terrorists are ordinary Kenyans, perhaps even retired military officers or military police officers. Because why do they hide themselves all the time? And when they are arrested, how many arrests have we had in Boni Forest? And when they are arrested, do we see their faces, proper faces in Maridi court or whichever other court? Because I never see them. It is like something mysterious. When you are dealing with the Boni Forest, since it is a no-go zone for very many of us, that for me is a non-international armed conflict. And that falls within the realm of Kenya Defense Forces. We cannot have our KDF personnel doing military drills in Dodo, in Saburu, in Giuggiu, in some very safe places. It's like they are afraid to do military drills where they should go, where they should, practical, not doing some funny military exercise within the camp. So I am of the view, like Captain Wanderi said, these military officers should be relocated from Lanet, from Kahawa, from Lagata, from Giuggiu. Let them go to our border lines where they can actually do proper military drills and then protect us, from these other people. Otherwise, we shall keep on singing about these conflicts in Boni, and Boni is on the border. Why can't they address this issue the way the KDF addressed the issue of Mount Elgon with Matakweni? So for me, I think the government is very lax on the issue of international security. And that's why we are being attacked, because they are like half-hearted. They do not put enough money. When they buy equipment, they buy funny equipment. The military are safe in Kahawa. Why would they stay in Kahawa, for God's sake? Why can't they go to Riboi and stay there where they are a rat? Otherwise, I think there is some laxity somewhere with the national security intelligence.
All right. Professor Noah Midamba.
Look at this issue from a global perspective. The fight in Iraq and Syria will come to a lull for some time. And the most active theater of the next strike is Africa, all the way from Libya to what's happening in Nigeria with Boko Haram to Al-Shabaab in East Africa. We are seeing an increasing activities of piracy that is, was gone but is now coming back. And Al-Shabaab is active within Kenya itself. And the local, you know, we're talking about soft power and hard power. The local have issue with land, they have issue with poverty, they have issue with education, they are marginalized. And it is hard to separate a marginalized person from sympathizing with this person who say, I'm acting on your behalf. So number one, agree with my colleagues here, Boni Forest should be declared a no-go zone and should be given to the military KDF operation to flush everyone in there. These guys are trained warriors. They're trained to kill. You know, so flush them all out, and then 25 kilometer parallel along Somalia-Kenya border should be a no-go zone for everyone, and such that you cannot come crossing the border 3 or 4 in the morning into Kenya. That person need to be taken out immediately. And we cannot sit back and say, oh, we're going to just get along. Everything is, you know. So these are the issues.
All right, let's hear from Werunga.
I agree. But I want to debunk Apollos. Apollos, the military is not idle. That's one thing. Two, we need to look at our national security architecture. When you start from the bottom, you have police. We call them civil police in the technical language. Above them, we have the paramilitary, which is the GSU. Now, within the administration police, we now have the rapid deployment force and the border patrol. Before you get to the military, the country must have decided that this thing is beyond our normal civil capacity to deal with it. And that's when the military is deployed. Now, the military cannot deploy itself. It is deployed by the National Security Council. For as long as they are not told to do that, they will continue practicing tough to fight easy. Now, Debarl, I want to come back to what we are saying. When you look at the KDF Act, and you look at subsection, pursuant to Article 241, sub 3C, where they talk of deployment of defense forces to restore peace in Kenya. When you look at 2, it says, whenever the defense forces are deployed to restore peace in any part of Kenya, pursuant to subsection 1 of Article 241, the chief of the defense forces shall be responsible for the administration, control, and overall superintendency of the operation. When you come to section 33(3), it says, wherever the defense forces are deployed pursuant to subsection 2, the Inspector General of the National Police Service shall be responsible for the administration, command, control, and overall superintendency of the operation. So what I'm trying to say is this: it is so easy now for the National Security Council, in consultation with the Defense Council, just to swap those 2 subsections and give this operation to the commander of the armed forces. It is that easy that you don't have to go through any other processes. It is just the National Security Council to say, we now hand over this operation to the military, and the law is very clear. And that's why we are saying, for as long as we keep on saying this operation is under the police, with the support of the military, it is going to be very difficult because the military are limited in their scope of operation when they are under the leadership of the Inspector General. But when you give them the power to be in charge of this operation, they make their own decisions, they come up with their own operational plans, and they deal with this problem together. And this, we've seen it in operations that some of us used to participate in. It was very easy when the military is in charge because they make their own decisions, they make plans themselves. They don't have to revert back to the command in the headquarters, because when you are sent to those kind of operations as a military officer, you are given the powers on what you're supposed to do. And you will act within those powers until you achieve your objective. Yes. Therefore, as a country, and I think we can talk about land, we can talk about ranches, we can talk about what we need to do is never to allow these fellows to settle in bony forests. Because the moment they do that, it will be very difficult, Debarl, to get them out. Big powers have never managed. Professor talked about Viet Cong. Americans never removed these guys from the forest. Vietnam, they never managed. Russia never managed the Taliban. They are called Mujahideen in the mountains of Afghanistan. So it becomes very difficult when they establish themselves. They have everything they think they can have for any military to think they can walk in and dislodge this fellow. So our worry is that as we continue talking about bony forest, these guys are establishing themselves. We need to take action now. We need to do it now and retake our country back.
Thank you. All right, back to you, Captain Wanderi, because I'm given to understand, if we hark back to 2002 and try and look at what you mentioned, the Lamu West, and you look also at the Lamu East, and what also you've given as the interest that people now are actually, keeping their eyes peeled, because how the potential of this land is big because of the projects that you will cut through. You're talking of Lapset, you've mentioned coal, you've mentioned the Kenmindi, you've mentioned the SGR and the rest. But if we go back also to 2002, we had an MP and a Mombasa tycoon who, I'm given to understand, also brought some clan around Lamu, right, in an unoccupied or unsurveyed land around Mpeketoni. And that particular elected MP also, with the support of these newcomers, right, and these newcomers tried to appropriate land for themselves when they actually took over. Bearing the fact that also we had squatters in there. And by 2007, we had these ranches being subdivided, right, owned by the newcomers, despite the fact that we had squatters there, mainly people of Somali and Swahili and Arab origins. But the ranches had squatters living inside there before the subdivision. Could this be potentially also what is happening in Lamu right now? Because we had squatters, yet people came, and of course they were given title deeds. The president maybe had to actually revoke this particular title deeds because they were controversial. Is that the case?
Yeah, I think, Debarl, you have captured it rightly. That sometimes I have seen people revert back and tell Marwa that if there are politicians involved, that he should arrest them. But as you've captured it rightly, the genesis of the problem in Lamu began in 2002. Because as you know, in this country, it has become the norm for politicians to mobilize on the basis of ethnicity. And that means if you bring a certain group of people in an area who are likely to support your re-election, then you succeed. And yes, we know that in 2002, particularly, we had an election where NAC came in, and once NAC came in, the person who was elected as the MP for Lamu West was a local. But by 2007, remember, that is the time we had a lot of competition because of the then issue between the then PNU and ODM. And in Lamu West, again, you had people using non-locals to bring them. In fact, you import voters from other counties and from other regions. And this provided the bulk of the support for the people who got elected that time. And subsequently, because these projects that are scheduled to take part in Lamu West were mooted around that time. That is when you had a lot of speculation and people running to acquire massive tracts of land in Lamu. But the problem began in the sense that the people who are brought in, especially, and sometimes it's good to say it because it's a fact, and that's the information on the ground. The people who came in were of Somali ethnicity. Some came from northeastern, others came from Mombasa. So they settled in areas around Mpeketoni, Hidi, and Poromoko. And in those
so they were extracted actually wherever they were,
yes,
solely for political reasons.
For political reasons. And when they settled in, that gave impetus for now large speculators, big large speculators, to claim that our people are here. But when the subdivision began, the subdivision did not go to those people who had camped in those places, because politically they had been used. They led the 6 ranches, went into companies owned by senior people, either in government or rich businessmen in the coastal region and other parts of Kenya. But as you say, the problem is when you give a title deed on land, and yet there are still other people, squatters in the land. You would call them squatters because the land had been not adjudicated and surveyed and titled. However, those people were resident there, and mainly these people were Christians from upcountry. There were Mijikenda, there were Kikuyus, there were Kambas, and there were Luo immigrants. But you've given people, these ranchers, title deeds. And that is when you saw the genesis in the attacks in 2014. That these, when the compensation for these projects, especially the Lamu port, began, if you looked at the names, in fact, if you remember, there was a tussle as to who benefits from the compensation. Should be noted that most of the people who are Lamu inhabitants, locals, will be found in Mkomani, Shela, Mada, and Faza Islands. So they felt that the people who are getting the land on the mainland, the compensation for the land, were non-locals. And that's where the conflict began, and you had the first attack in June 2014. And subsequently, the president was forced to cancel those title deeds. And once you cancel the title deed, it means that the land remains the way it was. The status quo pre-2007 remains. You have squatters, you have free and surveyed land, a very big portion, because the total acreage was 356,000. And that means there are people having appetite for this land. And as long as you have this appetite, people seeking to gain from the compensation due to these projects, or the projects we mentioned, then you have a very dicey situation, because then you have the land grievance being used as a basis to mobilize locals, to fight what they are calling non-locals, invaders. Secondly, to Islamize and to say that this is an Islamic, and those statements have been said by Al-Shabaab that, and Jesh Ayman, that Lamu is an Islamic area. We do not want people who are not Muslims. So this ideology, what Dr. Mustafa calls the spread of extremist ideology, is simply being used to advance land grievances and economic interests.
So is it used as a fig leaf to cover up?
Yes,
or it is purely, yes, they just want to sort of the caliphate expansion that you've always been talking about?
It's simply used to, you know, for you, you have to give ideological legitimacy to any conflict. And the ideological legitimacy is we are fighting for our land because non-locals are being compensated. Secondly, that we majority of the locals here are this religion. And these people who have come in and started preaching and having churches should not set up camp here.
Thank you very much. We have also reactions from Twitter. Let's see the rush of tweets, and at Usha Jose, she's standing by. Usha.
All right, been something your feedback, and it seems you have a lot to say on this topic, so I'll just get straight to it. Of course, our question was, do you think Operation Linda Boni has yielded the desired results? And we have Joseph, who says, I'm in Lamu, and I say a big no, because I don't see a reason as to why our KDF are more afraid of these enemies, such that they can't go deep to the forest and fish them out. The residents are still living in fear of attack. We have Winnie, who says, very ineffective, since there is no participation of the locals. Why should they not go directly to the people they know very well aid these terrorists? Operation Linda Boni is zero work. We also have Joseph, who says, Dr. Apollos Machira seems to know a lot about Lamu. He explained exactly the truth about Lamu. Moving on to Twitter, we have... my touch screen seems to be acting up. Yep, yeah, it doesn't seem like it'll work. So I guess we will have to keep the conversation online, #AMLiveNTV. That is how you can reach us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. And of course, since we haven't been able to have this segment, we will try to be even more active on social media. So do keep your comments coming. Back to you, Debarl.
Sorry, Usha, I can't come to your aid either. It seems also my laptop is acting up today. Monkeys are hanging on our lines. I've been trying to actually resuscitate this thing. Usha, what do we do? So I'll be remiss, of course, if I don't say we have your tweets here. We can't read them, as you see. Usha, she's established that we can't actually do them. But of course, also we'll allow 1 or 2 calls. Also, if you have a question or a contribution, you can also weigh in on that particular line as well. We continue with the conversation. Let's just hear from Dr. Mustafa. You agree with what Captain Wanderi is saying?
Yeah, in as far as the grievances that are there are concerned, Debarl. Now, Debarl, in any conflict, the thing that you will find at the center is grievance. And whatever kind of grievance that is there is going to be used or misused, manipulated, misappropriated for whatever interests that any group wishes to have. And Al-Shabaab is manipulating the grievance that is there in Lamu to precisely get its presence.
To get its presence, but
precise. But let's
ask questions here, because we need to know: is Al-Shabaab acting solely as Al-Shabaab, or are people instigating Al-Shabaab? You know, under the guise of, yes, we have an ideology, we want to have an expansionist agenda, and of course, taking the politics of the day within the land to, you know, push the envelope.
Al-Shabaab, this conflict has now become multi-layered. It's transformed into something else that is much more complex, much more complicated. Debarl, at the heart of any conflict, you will have the grievance. You will have the grievance owners and the war owners. The grievance owners are the people in Lamu. Their grievances about land, marginalization, and exclusion. And it doesn't matter whoever is there, whoever is in Lamu from all parts of Kenya will have that kind of a grievance. Now, the war owners in this situation is Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab has come in and is now owning that war. It's not owned by the locals. And even if Al-Shabaab was to become victorious, they're going to decapitate and decimate the people of Lamu, because the objectives of Al-Shabaab are very different from the objectives of the local people to try and address these grievances. And that is where government, experts, and those who are trying to resolve this conflict have got to isolate what are the grievances and address the grievances with the grievance owners in Lamu. And what are the issues here for the war owners? And that's where the military has got to address that directly.
But aren't we addressing the issues here? Because what are the issues? It's basically land. That's what we're saying. Because we have the J.Ash Ayman being assisted and funded by politicians and assisted by some local people who pay them, give them uniform, feed them, and provide medication, that they should now attack Christians, up-country people, as Captain Wanderi is saying, and police stations to empty the land of the so-called squatters, so that now they can ensure that the local Swahili Arab people, the barons there that we have, and the Somali business people are the only ones who get compensation for the nearly 10 mega projects that we're talking about, the planned Lamu West.
For Al-Shabaab, the problem is not land. For Al-Shabaab, the problem is their own understanding of the caliphate and control the people, the ideology.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. The question is, again, are the politicians using the Al-Shabaab as a conduit? You know, yes, you say it is the caliphate, but yes, they have their own agenda. But the politicians too have their own agenda. Are they coupling together to advance this particular notion?
Yeah, precisely. This is exactly what is going on. You know, because there is a group here, Jaish al-Ayman, that is that has shown and has demonstrated a capability to actually fight then most of the people there will look the other way and say, okay, let them do what they need to do, what they have to do. And that's where the problem is. And that's where the risk of a very serious insurgency that is going to be made worse by a pan-surgency situation that we are seeing in Lamu, that then will become very difficult for this country to deal with if it's not dealt with today.
Thank you, thank you. We have Simon from Bungoma hanging on the line. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning, Debarl and the panel.
Morning to you. You have a question or a contribution?
Yes, I have a contribution.
Very briefly, sir.
I've seen the terrorists usually come and use psychological warfare.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm suggesting that if we can employ psychologists in all these areas where there is turmoil, so that the psychologists can go and stay with the people on the ground and realize what will be their need and start educating them, impacting on their psychology, on their recognition, on their cognitive aspect. And eventually with the time, you will find that the people have appreciated what the government is delivering to them. Otherwise, the thugs come in and try to behave like saviors, like the savior, while they have their own diabolic course. So I am asking, are there psychologists, even in the army, in all the government operatives? Those are the savior for security in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. And of course, also, this is just picking up on the soft approach that we were talking about earlier, and Dr. Mustafa was alluding to that and saying that cannot be very helpful when it comes to Boni, right? But looking at the broader aspect, of course, and the long term, how should that also be approached? But let's hear from Dr. Werunga as also we give our headline thoughts. We'll come out a bit early today. Are we fighting a futile battle so far with this Operation Linda Boni? Because it seems the problem is very systemic. And all that we're applying now is just a band-aid solution, bombing and, you know, trying to scatter the militants from Boni Forest. But the issues are within. The enemy is within. Doctor?
I think I want to look at it in two ways. One, when you talk about returnees, majority of them, we are told, went back to Kwale, which means majority of the Kenyans who are recruited into Al-Shabaab are not necessarily from Lamu. Those are government figures, those are security figures. We also have some programs in Kwale, and we hear most of the returnees actually were from Kwale. But we don't seem to have the issue of land in Kwale yet. The problems of land in Kwale along the coast are basically the same. What I want to run away from, Debarl, is to characterize what we are seeing in Boni as a land problem. You realize that these people have been hitting Mandera, Elwak, all the way down to Lamu. I want to go back to what I said. They have captured the grievances of the local people. But their end goal as Al-Shabaab is not about land. They believe this country went into Somalia. This country has denied them the space to operate in southern Somalia. They shamed them in Kismayu. And for as long as we are still in Somalia, they believe they have a cause to cause chaos in this country. Now, what I've been saying is that these people are moving away from terrorism to insurgency. Now, when you get to a point where these people attempt to attack police stations during the day, they attempt to attack military bases during the day, this is no longer terrorism, because terrorism, like he says, the issue is about ideology and the objectives for which they want to cause chaos. What we are seeing is a systematic transformation from terrorism activities to insurgency. Now, if we don't start looking at this problem in Lamu as an insurgency, and we continue looking at it as a terror problem, we might be losing the plot here.
Thank you.
And therefore, we need as a country, whichever way we want to look at the Lamu problem, let's start looking at it as an insurgency problem as opposed to a terror problem.
Thank you. Let's hear from Professor Noah Midamba very briefly, 30 seconds, your closing remarks.
Debarl, Nelson Mandela once said that real leaders must be willing to sacrifice all for the freedom of their people. All the shenanigans, all the dancing, all the provocative dance by young men and women in front of children must be over. We have a few days left for election. We need to talk about real security issue for our people. We need to talk about real butter and bread issue for our people.
Thank you, thank you. Dr. Apollos Machira.
I would like to hear from the DCI Lamu and the National Intelligence in Lamu, whether they are happy with what is happening in their country, in their area, and whether they are comfortable with the curfew today. Because for us in Laikipia, we are comfortable with the curfew because things happen at night. And I also would like to know the contribution of the local people in Lamu as far as terrorism is concerned. Because there is, I think, a lot of inter-community tensions in Lamu because of the exodus of some people who went to Mpekotoni some times ago when there was a Kikuyu DC. At that time, there was a place, and now a place called Uitemele in Mpekotoni. Uitemele means kuja ujikatie. Ujikatie shamba na itakuwa yako. There is still that village. I almost went there. Fortunately, I didn't. So that kind of ideology, come and cut it and allocate to yourself.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Captain Wanderi, very briefly.
Yeah, Debarl, the cardinal responsibility of any government is the defense of its own territory as well as the protection of the lives and the property of the citizens. It is incumbent upon the government to put all its might together and deploy resources to protect the civilian population in all areas of conflict as we head towards elections. We're talking of the conflict in the counties of Mandera, Wajir, Tana River, Lamu, Baringo, and Laikipia. We cannot continue this way. And as Professor Midamba has said, the issue of security and coexistence among our people is the most important thing that we should focus on going forward.
Thank you. Dr. Mustafa, very briefly.
Yeah, Debarl, it is still tragic that we've had a situation where Boni Forest, we have a group that has settled there and is becoming much more difficult and posing a real threat to not just the security in Boni, but also national security. It's very important that this country focuses on and tries to prevent the localization of the more globalized versions of ideologies that are keeping ISIS and others alive, and try and address our issues, the conflicts that we have in the country.
Thank you, thank you. Dr. Simiyu, very briefly, 30 seconds.
Yes, I think I'll still urge the Commander-in-Chief to hand over that operation to the military. I think, to me, that will be the beginning of solving the problem. Not really the end, but the beginning of solving that problem.